That symbol wasn't supposed to mean anything to you. The billionaire's voice was calm, but every conversation in the restaurant seemed to fade the moment he spoke. A second earlier, Ethan Whitmore had been sitting alone beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, reviewing messages between bites of an expensive lunch. Then he saw it. A small circle drawn in pencil on the corner of a menu. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just a single mark made by a waitress. Yet within seconds he was on his feet. The menu was suddenly in his hands. Around him, forks paused halfway to plates. Glasses stopped moving. Even the soft piano music drifting through Whitmore Grand Hotel felt distant. Ethan stared at the circled symbol as if he had seen a ghost hidden in plain sight. Across from him stood Maya Brooks, 27 years old. Black apron, white shirt, a small order pad tucked beneath her arm. She looked exactly like she had looked every day for the last 2 years. Invisible to most guests. Forgettable to nearly everyone who walked through the revolving doors. Yet, at that moment, she held his complete attention. "Where did you see this?" Ethan asked. Maya glanced at the menu. "See what?" she replied softly. Her voice carried no fear. No excitement. Just quiet curiosity. Ethan narrowed his eyes. The symbol sat near the bottom corner beside a seafood entree. Most people never noticed it. Even if they did, it looked meaningless. Printing mistake. A decorative flourish. Nothing more. Maya lowered her gaze to the page. For a few seconds, she studied the prices, the spacing between lines, and the strange arrangement of letters scattered throughout the menu. Then she looked back up. "It isn't the symbol," she said. "It's what the symbol is pointing to." A murmur spread through the dining room. Ethan felt something unfamiliar tighten inside his chest. The menu had been redesigned 3 years earlier. Hundreds of employees had handled it. Thousands of customers had ordered from it. Not one person had ever said those words. Not one. Maya gently reached for a pencil resting near the register. Without asking permission, she drew several small marks beside different menu items. Her eyes moved quickly, calmly, deliberately, as if she were reading something written between the lines. Ethan watched in silence. For the first time in years, the billionaire who always had answers found himself staring at a waitress and wondering what she had just discovered. Maya did not seem to notice the attention gathering around her. She simply turned the menu slightly and traced her pencil along several prices. $12, $21, $34. Then she stopped. Her eyes moved to the first letters of selected menu items. Ethan watched every movement. The dining room remained unusually quiet. It was the kind of silence that appears when people sense something important is happening but do not yet understand why. "You arranged them intentionally," Maya said. "The numbers are not random. Neither are the item names." Ethan folded his arms. "Go on." Maya looked at him for a moment. Most puzzles try to hide information. This one hides a pattern. A server carrying a tray slowed down just enough to listen. A couple near the window stopped their conversation entirely. Maya continued. "The prices create a sequence. The sequence points to specific menu items. The first letters form a second sequence. Then the spacing between the descriptions confirms it." Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. 3 years earlier, he had spent an entire weekend building that code. Not because he needed to. Not because it served any business purpose. He had simply enjoyed puzzles. Complex ones. The kind that rewarded patience and observation. He had hidden the message where nobody would think to look. Inside something people used every day. The menu had become a private joke. A challenge no one knew existed. Until now. "What does it say?" one guest finally asked from across the room. Maya glanced toward Ethan. "That depends on whether he wants everyone to know." Several people laughed nervously. Ethan did not. His eyes remained fixed on her. "Tell me how you found it." Maya set the pencil down. "I notice patterns. Most people notice patterns. Not the ones they expect to ignore." That answer landed differently. Ethan had spent years surrounded by executives, consultants, analysts, and advisors. people who filled rooms with complicated explanations. Yet this waitress somehow spoke with more clarity than most of them. Maya gently straightened a stack of menus on the host's stand. People stop paying attention to familiar things, she said. A menu becomes background. Once something becomes background, nobody asks questions anymore. Ethan looked at the page again. Suddenly he remembered why he created the puzzle in the first place. He had once believed that curiosity was the rarest skill in the world. Looking at Maya, he wondered if he had finally met someone who proved that theory right. "How long did it take you?" he asked quietly. Maya thought for a second. Maybe 30 seconds. The answer hit the room harder than anyone expected. Several guests exchanged stunned looks. 30 seconds. Puzzle untouched for years. Solved while taking lunch orders. Maya offered a small shrug, as if she had merely commented on the weather. Then she picked up her order pad. "Table 14 is waiting for iced tea," she said. "If we are done talking." For the first time that afternoon, Ethan Whitmore found himself completely speechless. The dining room slowly returned to life, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations resumed in softer voices. Silverware clinked against plates again. Yet every few minutes, someone glanced toward Maya Brooks as if expecting another impossible surprise. Maya, meanwhile, carried a tray of iced tea to table 14 with the same calm expression she had worn all afternoon. She took orders, refilled coffee cups, smiled politely when customers thanked her. Nothing about her behavior suggested she had just solved a puzzle that had baffled everyone else for years. Ethan Whitmore remained standing near the host's stand. For the first time in a long time, he was not thinking about acquisitions, quarterly reports, or investor meetings. He was thinking about a waitress. Not because she wanted something from him. Not because she had impressed him with rehearsed intelligence. But because she seemed completely uninterested in impressing anyone at all. That bothered him. Curiosity had built his fortune. Yet Maya had triggered a level of curiosity he could not easily satisfy. 20 minutes later, he was still watching her move through the restaurant. She never checked whether anyone was watching. She never looked proud of herself. She simply worked. Finally, Ethan stepped away from the dining room and entered a private office overlooking the hotel lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the afternoon sunlight. A leather chair sat behind a polished walnut desk. On the desk rested an identical copy of the menu. Ethan placed it down carefully and studied the coded structure hidden inside. Every detail was exactly as he remembered. Every layer of logic remained intact. Yet somehow Maya had seen through it almost immediately. His phone buzzed. A message from his executive assistant appeared on the screen. The board meeting scheduled for 3 o'clock had been confirmed. Ethan ignored it. Instead, he opened a blank document and began typing questions. How did she recognize the sequence so quickly? Why did she look at the spacing first? What experience could possibly train someone to notice patterns buried inside ordinary objects? He stopped typing halfway through. Something else bothered him more. Maya had not reacted when she discovered the code. Most people would have celebrated. Most people would have wanted recognition. She treated the solution as though it were obvious. Ethan leaned back in his chair and stared toward the city skyline beyond the glass. Then a memory surfaced. 20 years earlier, his father had once told him something during a chess match. The most dangerous minds are not the loud ones. They are the quiet ones. The people nobody notices until they have already seen 5 moves ahead. Ethan had laughed at the advice back then. Now he was no longer laughing. Across the hotel, Maya finished clearing a table and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She had no idea that a billionaire was sitting in his office replaying every word she had spoken. Or perhaps she did know, and simply did not care. Somehow, that possibility intrigued Ethan even more. The afternoon crowd gradually thinned as sunlight drifted across the marble floor of the hotel lobby. Outside, traffic moved through downtown Manhattan in steady waves. But inside Whitmore Grand Hotel, Ethan Whitmore remained distracted. His 3 o'clock board meeting came and went without him. 2 phone calls were ignored. A dozen emails remained unopened. None of that was normal. Ethan was known for precision, schedules, efficiency. Yet every time he tried to focus on business, his thoughts returned to Maya Brooks. Near 6 o'clock, Maya finished her shift. She folded her apron carefully, placed it inside her locker, and slipped on a navy coat that had clearly been worn for years but was kept in excellent condition. She checked her watch, gathered a canvas bag, and headed toward the employee exit. What she did not know was that Ethan happened to be crossing the lobby at the same moment. He noticed her immediately, not because she stood out. Quite the opposite. She moved through the building with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being overlooked. Most people hurried through doors. Maya seemed to notice every detail around her. A misplaced brochure near the concierge desk. A crooked picture frame on the wall. A child searching for a dropped toy beside a sofa. She picked up the toy, handed it back with a smile, then continued walking without waiting for thanks. Ethan found himself watching. Again. Before he realized it, he was following her path through the lobby. Not closely, just enough to observe. Maya stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights had begun to glow against the darkening sky. She crossed the street, passed several restaurants, and entered a small neighborhood bookstore 2 blocks away. Ethan hesitated before following. The bookstore was narrow and quiet. Wooden shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. The smell of paper and coffee filled the air. Maya walked directly toward the back corner. She did not browse casually. She seemed to know exactly where she was going. Ethan stayed near the entrance, pretending to examine a display table. From across the room, he watched Maya remove a notebook from her bag. It was the same notebook he had noticed earlier. The one filled with strange symbols and handwritten observations. She sat beside a window and opened it. Ethan expected equations, complex diagrams, advanced mathematical formulas. Instead, he saw page after page of observations. Patterns in architecture, repeated number sequences on subway signs, notes about language structures, sketches of layouts from places she had visited. Tiny details most people would never notice. Maya was not collecting answers. She was collecting questions. The realization surprised him. A few minutes later, an elderly bookstore owner approached her table carrying 2 cups of tea. Maya smiled warmly. They exchanged a few words and laughed softly. Clearly, they knew each other well. Ethan watched from a distance. Something about the scene felt important. Not because of what was happening, because of what was missing. There was no performance, no audience, no attempt to impress anyone. The same intelligence that had stunned an entire restaurant existed even when nobody was looking. Ethan slowly closed the book in his hands. For the first time, he began to suspect that solving the menu had been the least interesting thing about Maya Brooks. The next morning arrived with a steady gray drizzle coating the streets of Manhattan. Maya Brooks stepped through the employee entrance carrying the same canvas bag and the same notebook tucked beneath her arm. To her, it felt like any other workday. To Ethan Whitmore, it did not. He had spent most of the previous evening thinking about the pages he had seen in that bookstore. The notes, the observations, the endless collection of patterns. By 8 o'clock, he was already inside his office. A cup of untouched coffee cooling beside his desk. A report sat open on his screen. Not a background check. Not a private investigation. Just a simple employment file. 2 years at the hotel. Excellent performance reviews. No disciplinary issues. No special recognition programs. Nothing extraordinary. Ethan frowned. The file described an employee. It did not explain Maya Brooks. Downstairs, the breakfast crowd filled the restaurant with the familiar sounds of clinking dishes and quiet conversation. Maya moved between tables with practiced efficiency. She remembered names, recalled drink preferences, noticed when a guest seemed rushed and when another wanted to linger over coffee. Small things, invisible things, the kind most people overlooked. Around 10 o'clock, an executive from Ethan's company entered the restaurant for a scheduled meeting. His name was Daniel Mercer, one of the firm's senior financial analysts. As he reviewed documents at a corner table, a sheet of paper slipped from his folder and landed on the floor without him noticing. Maya picked it up while passing by. Her eyes paused on the page for less than a second. Then she handed it back. "You have 2 numbers reversed," she said politely. Daniel blinked. "Excuse me?" Maya pointed gently toward a chart. "The 3rd quarter figures. The sequence changes here. If those 2 numbers stay reversed, the projection shifts." Daniel stared at the page. A moment later, his expression changed completely. He pulled out a calculator, checked the figures, then checked them again. "She is right," he whispered. The mistake was small, easy to miss, but it altered the forecast by millions of dollars. Ethan happened to witness the entire exchange from a balcony overlooking the dining room. He did not move. He simply watched as Daniel thanked Maya repeatedly while she returned to work as if nothing unusual had happened. No pride. No dramatic explanation. Just quiet competence. An hour later, Ethan finally walked into the restaurant. Employees immediately straightened their posture. Managers appeared from nowhere. Conversations softened. Maya looked up from refilling a coffee cup. Their eyes met briefly. Ethan approached her table. "When your shift ends today," he said, "I would like to ask you a few questions." Maya studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once. "If I can answer them, I will." Ethan almost smiled. Most people rushed to impress him. Most people treated his attention like an opportunity. Maya treated it like a scheduling request. And somehow that made him even more determined to understand who she really was. The rest of the day passed more slowly than either of them expected. Maya continued working her tables while Ethan returned to meetings he barely remembered afterward. Every few hours, he found himself glancing toward the restaurant below. By early evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the city streets shining beneath reflections of yellow lights and passing taxis. At 6 o'clock sharp, Maya finished her shift. She exchanged a few words with coworkers, collected her canvas bag, and headed toward the executive lounge Ethan had reserved for their conversation. The room overlooked the skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the fading sunset. A silver coffee service sat untouched on a polished table. Ethan was already there when Maya arrived. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You asked questions," Maya replied. "I said I would answer if I could." Ethan gestured toward a chair. Maya sat calmly, placing her notebook on the table beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan picked up the menu that had started everything. "I need to know something," he said. "When you saw the code, what made you look deeper?" Maya glanced at the menu and smiled faintly. "Because it looked wrong." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Wrong. Not visually. Logically." She folded her hands together. "Most people think information hides inside complexity. Sometimes it hides inside simplicity. The symbol was too small to matter, which made it interesting." Ethan leaned back. That answer sounded exactly like something he might have said years ago. Before success, before schedules, before every hour became measured in profit and loss. "Who taught you to think like that?" he asked. For the first time, Maya looked away toward the darkening skyline. The silence lasted several seconds. "My father," she said quietly. "He noticed things other people missed." Ethan waited. Maya rarely seemed eager to discuss herself. "Was he a professor?" Ethan asked. "Engineer? Mathematician?" Maya shook her head. "None of those." Her fingers rested lightly on the notebook. "He repaired clocks." Ethan blinked. "Clocks? Old ones? Antique ones? Some were over 100 years old." A small smile touched her face. "When I was a little girl, he used to tell me that every object leaves clues. A clock tells you what time it is. But if you pay attention, it also tells you who built it, who repaired it, who cared for it, and who ignored it." Ethan listened carefully. "He taught me to look beyond the obvious," Maya continued. "Not because it made me smarter, because it made life more interesting." The room grew quiet again. Outside, thousands of lights glittered across Manhattan. Ethan looked at the notebook beside her. Suddenly he understood something. Maya did not collect patterns because she wanted recognition. She collected them because she genuinely loved understanding the world. And that realization explained more than any employment file ever could. Ethan looked out across the city for a long moment. Somewhere below, thousands of people hurried through their evenings. Deals were being negotiated. Markets were moving. Fortunes were changing. Yet the conversation taking place inside that quiet lounge felt strangely more important. "What happened to your father?" he asked gently. Maya lowered her eyes to the notebook resting beside her. Her fingers brushed the worn cover. "He passed away 8 years ago," she said. "A heart condition." Ethan nodded slowly. "I am sorry." Maya gave a small smile. "So was I." The answer carried no bitterness, only honesty. Ethan had expected sadness, regret. Instead, he heard gratitude. "He sounds like he was an extraordinary man." Maya laughed softly. "Most people would not have described him that way." "Why not?" "Because he fixed clocks in a small shop and spent half his day talking to customers who never bought anything." Ethan smiled despite himself. "And yet he taught you to see things that entire teams of analysts miss." Maya glanced toward the skyline. "He taught me to pay attention. The rest came later." Silence settled between them again. Comfortable silence. The rare kind that did not need filling. Then Ethan noticed something tucked between the pages of her notebook. A photograph. Old. Slightly faded. Maya followed his gaze. "That is him," she said. She handed him the picture. Ethan studied it carefully. A man stood behind a wooden workbench surrounded by antique clocks. His smile was warm. His clothes were simple. Nothing about him suggested wealth or status. Yet his eyes held the same quiet focus Ethan had noticed in Maya. "He looks proud," Ethan said. Maya nodded. "He was proud of almost everything. Even when business was slow? Especially then." Ethan looked up. Maya's expression had changed. There was affection in her voice now. "He used to say that success is a strange thing," she explained. "People think it means having more." He thought it meant noticing more. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Those words lingered. Noticing more. It sounded simple, yet suddenly it felt profound. For years he had been surrounded by information. Reports, forecasts, metrics, endless streams of data. Yet somewhere along the way he had stopped noticing things. The shape of a conversation. The meaning behind a pause. The person standing quietly in the corner of a room. Maya had solved his puzzle because she noticed what everyone else ignored, including him. "You know," Ethan said thoughtfully, "when I first saw you in the restaurant, I assumed you were unusual because of your intelligence." Maya tilted her head slightly. "And now," Ethan looked at the notebook, the photograph, the city lights beyond the glass. "Now I think your intelligence is just a consequence of something else." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What is that?" Ethan smiled. "You never stopped being curious." For a moment Maya said nothing. Then she looked down at the photograph of her father and smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "He would have liked that answer," she said quietly. The conversation stretched far longer than either of them expected. The city outside had transformed into a sea of lights, each window glowing like a distant story waiting to be discovered. Maya closed her notebook and slipped the photograph carefully back between its pages. Ethan noticed the gesture. Deliberate, respectful, as though memories deserved the same care as valuable possessions. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. Ethan nodded. "Why did you create the code in the menu?" The question caught him off guard. For 2 days he had been asking the questions. Now the roles had quietly reversed. Ethan looked down at the menu still resting on the table. "Honestly," Maya waited. "Because I missed puzzles." She smiled faintly. "That simple? That simple." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "When I started my company, every day felt like solving something impossible. There were problems nobody had answers for. Every decision mattered. Every obstacle forced me to think differently." He looked toward the skyline. "Then the company grew. Success arrived. After a while, people stopped bringing me problems. They started bringing me reports. Maya nodded as if she understood immediately. Reports explain the past, she said. Problems create the future. Ethan laughed softly. Exactly. The answer surprised him. Most executives needed entire presentations to communicate ideas that Maya expressed in a single sentence. The code was never supposed to accomplish anything, Ethan admitted. It was just a reminder, a small challenge hidden in plain sight. Maya glanced at the menu, and nobody solved it. Until you. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maya asked a question Ethan did not expect. Were you disappointed? He frowned. Disappointed? That it was solved. Ethan looked at her carefully. The question seemed strange at first. Then he understood. Maya was not asking about the puzzle. She was asking about what came after. He considered the answer. No, he said finally. Relieved. Maya tilted her head slightly. Why? Ethan smiled. Because if nobody could solve it, then maybe the world had become exactly what I feared. And what was that? Too busy to notice. The words lingered in the quiet room. Maya looked out across the city. Down below, headlights flowed through the streets like rivers of light. Thousands of people rushing somewhere. Thousands of people looking forward, backward, everywhere except the present moment. My father used to say something similar, she said. What did he say? A small smile appeared. The answers are usually standing right in front of us. We just keep looking somewhere else. Ethan laughed quietly. Then he stopped, because suddenly he realized how true that felt. For years, he had searched for exceptional people in prestigious universities, executive boardrooms, and industry conferences. Yet one of the most remarkable minds he had ever encountered had been serving coffee 30 feet from his office. And he had never noticed her until she solved a puzzle he thought nobody could see. The clock on the lounge wall showed nearly 9 o'clock when their conversation finally began to slow. The city outside remained awake, glowing beneath a blanket of light and motion. Ethan glanced at his watch and shook his head with a quiet laugh. I cannot remember the last time I spent 3 hours talking without discussing business. Maya smiled. Maybe that is why it felt interesting. Ethan nodded. She was probably right. Most conversations in his world revolved around objectives, negotiations, and outcomes. This one had revolved around ideas, curiosity, observation, things that rarely appeared on financial statements. He looked at the notebook resting beside her, then at the menu still sitting between them. Finally, he made a decision. Maya, he said, I would like to offer you an opportunity. Maya listened without reacting. I am creating a small research group inside the company, Ethan continued. Not analysts, not consultants, people who approach problems differently. He paused. I think you would be extraordinary at it. Maya looked down for a moment before meeting his eyes again. You barely know me. Ethan smiled. That is true. Then how can you be so certain? The question was fair. Ethan thought carefully before answering. Because intelligence is easy to find. Resumes are full of it. Degrees are full of it. What is rare is the ability to stay curious after life gives you reasons to stop. The room grew quiet. Maya looked toward the skyline. For several seconds, she said nothing. Ethan did not rush her. He had learned enough about Maya Brooks to know she took every question seriously. Finally, she spoke. That is generous. It is sincere. She nodded slowly. Then came the answer Ethan had not expected. No, Ethan blinked. Not because he was offended. Because he genuinely had not anticipated it. No. Maya smiled softly. Not right now. Ethan studied her expression. There was no hesitation. No fear. Just certainty. May I ask why? Maya rested a hand on her notebook. Because I still like where I am. Ethan laughed quietly. Most people would leave tomorrow. Most people are not me. Fair enough. The answer felt perfectly consistent with everything he had learned about her. Maya was not chasing status. She was not chasing titles. She was not even chasing recognition. She was chasing understanding. And apparently she could do that anywhere. Ethan stood and walked toward the window. Below them, Manhattan stretched into the distance. Endless lights, endless stories. You know, he said thoughtfully, I spent years believing that exceptional people announced themselves. Maya joined him beside the glass. And now, Ethan smiled. Now I think they usually arrive quietly. Maya looked out across the city. That is because the loudest thing about them is not what they say. Ethan glanced toward her. What is it, then? Maya smiled. What they notice.